You guys want to go on a little drive? Today we're talking about the very basic elements of storytelling. This is probably a review for most of you. That's great. Story elements, number one. What is fiction? Of course you know this. Fiction is a made-up story, right? As opposed to non-fiction. Okay, quick quiz. Shrek. Is Shrek fiction or non-fiction? Well, did Shrek really happen? Sorry, it didn't. The most basic part of fiction is probably the setting. When the story takes place and where it takes place. So Shrek takes place in some mythical kingdom. What's it called? I don't know. Shrek Town? I really should do more research on Shrek before I use it as an example. We're in a car. Talk about cars. Cars takes place in, I think it's called Radiator Springs. How do I know that? I don't know. Characters are the people or things that do things in the story. So Shrek would be the Shreks. I guess they're ogres. They're not Shreks. And cars are the cars, and etc. And there's two kinds of characters, okay? There's main characters and minor characters. Main characters are obviously the main characters. They're the ones that do the things. And main characters are, here's a key word, dynamic. That's in quotes. Dynamic means they change over the course of the story. They start off one way, and in the end of the story, they're different. So Shrek, in the beginning, is a jerk and he doesn't need friends. At the end, he's got a whole group of friends, including a donkey, right? Minor characters are characters who don't change very much. They're there more for background stuff. Like, I don't know, what's the cat's name? Puss in Boots, right? Maybe I'm wrong, and if he is, message me. He doesn't change over the course of the story, and the story really isn't about him. Plot is the stuff that happens in the story, right? It's the sequence of events, the things that occur. These can be decisions that characters make or things that happen to them. And you might remember from one of your classes a plot diagram. A plot diagram is like kind of like a check mark, right? I'll flash a picture up here or do a different little video on that. But in the plot diagram, you're going to have exposition. Exposition is where at the very beginning of a story, and by the way, all stories do this. At the beginning of the story, they set up the setting and they set up who the characters are. So Shrek is living his life in a swamp. Things are fine enough, I guess, for him. And then something happens. This is this next thing in the plot is the first conflict. I call it the initial conflict. It's where something happens and stuff gets real. The world can't go back to the way it was, the initial conflict. After the initial conflict, you have rising action. It's a series of events. Most of the story is this that leads up and builds suspense until you get to the climax, the most exciting part of the story. And you have to turn it off because it's so scary. Hey, let's go through a roundabout. Did you have to blinker to enter a roundabout? Did you know that? I did, because I'm a good driver. Then there is something called the resolution/falling action. So after everything happens, big explosion, everything's got to get wrapped up, right? And usually the characters have undergone some sort of change. Once we see what that change is, we can kind of figure out what the movie's really about. Shrek is a story about ogres, but it's not really about ogres. It's about letting somebody in. Does that make sense? And so the topic is like one word or two words that says what it's about. Cars is about friendship. Is that true? I don't know. A theme statement is a sentence. It's got to be a full sentence. It's got to be a complete thought that tells what the moral or lesson of the story is. It's important that it be a complete thought. A theme couldn't be just friendship, because that doesn't say if the story says friendship is good or bad. So you couldn't just say Shrek is about friendship. Is it taking the side for friendship, or is it taking a side against friendship? Let's use the story of Orpheus as an example for this. I'm going to walk through the story and kind of label the parts of the story for you. In the very, very beginning, Orpheus, they get married, Eurydice, they get married, and we have the wedding. There's a bad omen there at the wedding. All of this is the exposition. It's stuff that happens before the initial conflict. The initial conflict is, of course, she steps on a viper and dies. Really sad. But that's the thing that sparks everything in motion. Then we've got some rising action, okay? Rising action is, I don't know, Orpheus sings a lot. Orpheus decides to go to the underworld and pay a visit to Hades. Orpheus makes a deal with Hades. Hades says to Orpheus, okay, you can take her, but don't look back. She'll walk behind you out of the underworld, but don't look back. Orpheus says, cool, no problem, I got that. Rising action leads us to the climax. And the climax of this story is Orpheus is an idiot and turns around to look at her anyway. And as a result, she snapped back to the underworld, which sucks for both of them, right? And we're all super mad at Orpheus for being an idiot. There's going to be some falling action and resolution. Orpheus goes back home and never loves again. So what are some possible topics of this? Well, one topic could be patience, and one topic could be keeping your word. Those aren't themes yet. Those are just saying what it's about. Because if I just say patience, that doesn't say if the story says patience is good or bad. The moral of the story, don't be patient? No, of course not. Is the moral of the story, don't keep your word? No, that's absurd. Maybe a possible theme for this story would be, if you are too impatient, sometimes you can lose the thing you were waiting for. Hey, that's pretty good, right? If you're too impatient for something to happen, it might actually destroy the thing that you want to happen. Okay, that is my quick little video summarizing story elements. I hope you liked it.